Hi there, welcome to this refurbishment series where we're bringing back to life a lovely old Keil Kraft Bantam from the mid 1950s. And you can see I've got the fuselage hanging up here that's all stripped down and ready to be worked on. Now up till now we have stripped everything. We've got the engine cleaned up and running and a few parts made for that. Got the wing strengthened and covered, and now we're moving on to this tailplane. Now the tailplane is, it hasn't got an elevator. Now, this model was a rudder only model, and I'm going to convert it to 2-channel so that we've got an elevator, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So what I'll do is I'll get this, I've got my balsa building board, and I'll get this on the table, we'll get this set up and we'll have a look at what we're going to do. Just one comment to make first before I start pinning this down is that this tailplane is a little bit warped. It's just curved up like that. It's not twisted or anything, it just curved up. So if we put pressure in the middle, and it's curved up about the same amount. Now I'm hoping we can correct that, because I think a lot of the strength is going to be in this trailing edge here. So we're obviously going to cut that out. We can put a new piece of timber in there and hopefully get this wing straight. If it's still got a little bit of a lift, I may just move it onto the edge of something like that, put some weights on and just steam this front edge and see if that makes a difference. But I think we can hopefully get it out, mostly anyway, like I say, by replacing this piece of wood. So I'll get this pinned down and we'll have a look at what we're going to do. Right, well I've got a cunning plan now how I'm going to put an elevator in this tailplane. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the tail end of the ribs out, and I'm going to slot in this piece of 1/4 by 3/8 balsa like that. It's kind of on the hardish side of medium. It's the lightest I've got, to be honest, but it's lovely and straight, so it should add some strength to keep this from warping, hopefully, or to take out the warp. On the bit here where it goes the fuselage, I'm actually just going to cut a slot here so it will slot down. I mean, I could cut this, but I think it'd be nice to keep it as one because it is nice and straight, and it will help, as I said, to keep this flat. Now I've measured the height of the ribs, just cut a little piece off, and I put that in there like that. And if I put that in there, that will give enough height to just profile that. So we've got that in there like that, and I'm going to put a piece of balsa so we keep the tips just coming upwards, either end of course, and then we can build in, and another piece here just coming up, and then we can build in these 2 elevators. So anyway, I will get all this cut out and then we'll have a look at it. Hope that made sense, but if not, I'll show you in a minute and it'll all be clearer. Right, I've been cracking on with this now. You can see I've got the trailing edge cut out. I've got this piece of 1/4 inch by 3/8 balsa glued in, and I've got some little edge pieces on here just so we've got these 2 bays for the elevators. You can see there's a piece on the end there. This obviously needs profiling and all bringing down now to the correct profile for this wing, and a lot of that I will be using my David plane, which is a great thing for doing this kind of work. I'm then going to make the elevators, which I said were going to be joined by a piece of wire so that they both operate as one. So there'll be a C-shaped piece of wire like that. Now that does create complications because of this central section, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to profile this all nice like I said. I'm then going to remove this and it will be in the right shape, and then I'm going to finish the wing, finish the elevators, cover the wing, cover the elevators, fit the elevators, and then cover this and then stick that back on. It's just that the wire will need to go through the center of this piece here, so we're going to need to have a channel. And if I start cutting out the channel, it's going to weaken this, but also it's going to make it very difficult for the hinges to go in. So it'll become apparent later on how that's going to work. And we must remember that there's a keel. This is the keel I took off. I'll make a new one rather than cleaning this one up. And that goes on the underside of there, so that will provide even more strength to this section. But it'll be easy enough to remove this and to fit it together as a bit of a jigsaw. So I think that's probably the best way to make this work. Only time will tell. Actually, I've just taken the pins out and I thought it was worth just showing you the how it's taken out a lot of that bow of the wing. It's still a little bit there, but very, very little. Probably very slightly more that side than that side. And as I said, it's, I don't know whether I can line that up, but it's looking a lot straighter now. So I think all thanks to that piece of wood, which we are going to trim down because there's a lot of planing and sanding, but hopefully it won't spring back up. I'm quite pleased with that. So let's get on with these elevators and what else was it? The profiling, of course. Right, well, I've now got this profiled, shaped up, and I'm quite pleased with how it's looking. So I've cut myself a piece of balsa, the right thickness, this is actually 8mm 5/16, and I still need to cut this into the two individual elevators, but I thought first of all I would plane it to size, and I put on the rough profile on either end, which I need to meet. I just put that up against there and drew that on. And now I'm going to use my David plane just to bring this down to size. And I'm going to plane it on the edge of the bench, as you can see. And I've just got a piece of spruce here, which I've clamped to the bench. And I'm just using that to stop this sort of sliding as I plane. If not, I'll be pushing it up the bench and it'll be driving me nuts. So by putting that on there, that just allows me to nice and easily plane this. I mean, these David planes are absolutely brilliant and really good for this kind of work. Look, I don't even need to hold it hardly, although I will do. But yeah, I really like this kind of job, making these elevators or ailerons, that kind of stuff with a plane. It just goes so nice, but you do need a nice sharp blade set right. So anyway, I will get on and make this elevator. Right, well, we're almost there now. You can see the end of that. It's starting to look really nice, and I find this such a lovely, rewarding process. I just absolutely love doing it. So, I mean, the last bit, putting a few little bits of lines in there just because there's some muck on the blade, but that is almost there now. And I think I might actually stop there and just a little bit, but I might just do that with a sandpaper, just smooth that off a little bit. There we go, off the back. And yeah, I think that now has come down to the right thickness. I think if I go any more, I'm going to take too much off. Brilliant. So I'll get that light dusting and then we'll get these cut up into size. Right, now we're almost ready to join these elevators together, but first of all I want to get them hinged, and so they're moving nicely individually. You can see I've done this one here, and I've put in a couple of pieces of extra balsa just where the hinges are going. And I'm only putting 2 hinges in this. I was kind of toying with the idea of putting 3 in, but I think it'd be a lot easier with 2, and it'll certainly be strong enough. I'm going to eventually peg these hinges when I put the structure together, but I won't do that until I've got the covering done. Now the hinges I'm using are these small Dubro hinges. I really like these. They're strong, they're thin, they're small enough for these kind of models. Really nice. Now, like I say, I've done that one. You can see I'm going to put the slots in here. You can see I've marked a centre line, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a scalpel and I'm going to, let me just mark on where that's going to go, the width, and then I'm just going to use a scalpel and put a slot in. There we go. Now you can get hinging tools, I've got one here, but I find that using things like this, the slots are too big, they're sloppy. If I was going to epoxy them in, then that would be okay, but for what I'm doing here, I would rather do it with a scalpel. And I'm just going to start the cut very gently with a nice sharp blade. So you can see I'm just going down. Now this is quite hard balsa I've used on this trailing edge, and it'll be a lot easier in the soft balsa on the elevator. Now just going to push that in nice and horizontal until we come deep enough, and then I'm just going to work that way. There we go, and that now is a slot that is long enough, but that is quite tight. That's going to be too tight for this hinge, so I'm just going to put a little bit of a twist on the scalpel and move it backwards and forwards. I'm going to turn it over, and again I'm going to push that in like that, and I'm going to move that backwards and forward, and we're just kind of stretching the slot a little bit. Like I say, if we use a hinging tool like that, it is too thick, and the hinges do end up really sloppy. Now that should hopefully go in a little bit tight still, so I'll just work the scalpel a little bit more and make this just a little bit looser. Now that should go in there now. It doesn't help that this is really hard balsa, but you can see we're getting the hinge in. We need to be careful not to stress the actual hinge itself so we do any damage, but that has gone in there now nice and tight, and eventually when we come to peg it, that will provide a really strong fixing. I'm not going to glue these at all, like I say, just the peg. Now I'm going to do the same process on the elevator, but on the elevator, when I cut the slot, rather than going horizontally like that, I'm going to do it at an angle and try and do the slot in the center of the balsa, so that we don't end up popping out on the top surface. So I'll get these done and we'll have a look once we've got them both hinged. Okay, so we've got the hinges in there, and we've got the slots cut on the elevator, and this should just slot together now, hopefully. The elevators are still a little bit too long, but I will file or sand them to fit nicely once we've got them joined together. There, you see that goes together quite nicely now. We'll need the corners, back corners of these elevators rounding off so we get full movement on the elevator, but you can see that's quite nice there now. So that one comes up a little bit higher, just the shape of these, but once we get those corners off, these will both move equally. This maybe push, yeah. So what I'm going to do now is, I've got this central section which I think needs to come out for the moment. I should have perhaps not put it in, but what I'm going to do now is mark out where the wire is going to go, and I think we'll bring it to about there. I'm very mindful of the weight, because we're obviously adding quite a lot of weight to the rear of this plane, which isn't a brilliant idea, but we don't have any choice. So there we go. Now I'm going to bend up a piece of C metal now that will just come along the back here and down and into there. It'll be good to get these joined together, and I will epoxy that wire into place, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. Well, I've got my joining bar made up, and I've marked on where I need to drill the holes, and I've got a cross on either side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to drill the hole with just with a pin vise. I would suggest you do it by hand rather than with anything powered, or you could end up coming out the other side. So I'm just going to start it off, and we need to make sure that this again follows the center line of the let me just move the camera a little bit. There we go. Follows the kind of the center line of the elevator, because we don't want it popping out. So I'm just gently drilling that and making sure that goes square. I mean, this is nice soft balsa. Right, I've got the hole drilled in that now for the wire, and I'm just going to use a scalpel and just cut out a channel so that the wire can kind of be sunk into the back of the elevator, so it's not sticking proud. I mean, if it's sticking out a little bit, it doesn't matter too much, but if we can sink it in a little bit, that'll be all the better. So now, and we can put this on the table, just push it down, and hopefully that should be in line. I don't know whether I can show that, but the best thing to do is to put it on the bench nice and flat and just make sure that it's all nicely lined up. And you can see actually there's a little bit of a, just curves a little bit, so I need to just bend the wire slightly, and just a little bit of manipulation to get it right. So once I've done that and I'm happy it's straight, which actually I think it is now, I've got a ruler here, that's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's good. Just needed a very slight bend. What I can do is I'll set this up to glue it, and I'll show you how I'm going to make sure that it's in a lovely straight line when it's glued. I've got the steel in there and I've roughed it up so it's ready to be glued. I haven't glued it yet. I've got a nice straight edge held down and so it won't move, and I've got these parallel bars, steels, against that so that we can push the elevator structure against it, but it still leaves this area clear, so rather than just pushing against this straight edge. So that's like that, and then I'm just going to use these blocks just to push in the center there to make sure that it's held in the right position. Now we need to set this up in a situation where it's not under pressure. We're not forcing it, twisting it. It's happy to sit in that position on its own. You see, if I take the weights away, it doesn't spring either way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put epoxy in those holes, and I'll probably use a hypodermic with a blunt needle, inject it in, push this together, and then we can leave this for half an hour. I'm going to use 30 minutes epoxy. So and then we'll have a look. I'll get this, once I've done that, I've glued it, I'll get these back edges cleaned up and get it fitted to the tailplane. The hinges I'm using, I don't know whether I said this, they're Dubro small hinges. I really like these, they're really nice hinges. So let's get this glued up. Right, well, I've now got this elevator finished, so let's take a quick look. Right, well, as you can see, I've got the elevator on and hinged, and that's working really nicely. And I've got it joined with the piece of wire that I epoxied in place. And I've also just chamfered the back of these elevators so you get more movement, and that's going to be plenty enough for what we need. Now I took off this central piece, as I said, and I decided, rather than using that, I decided to make a new piece. And what I've done is I've put a slot in the back there. Just see that. And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to cover the tailplane and cover the elevators. I will then join them together and peg the hinges so that's secure, and then I will actually stick this in place. I'll cover this, sorry, first, and then stick that in place. Now that's the only way I can do this to make this work that I can see anyway. Now that isn't going to be hugely strong because this is quite thin, but what we need to remember is we've got a keel, and I've made another keel that will then go on the underside of here like that, which will provide the strength that we need to make that a lot stronger and secure. So I think that's going to be quite a nice solution. I think it will work quite well. Well, it's really good to get this elevator finished, or at least in a position now where I can start to think about getting this covered, and I'm quite looking forward to covering it. It's been an interesting job just modifying this and actually straightening out the tailplane, getting out some of that dihedral, which has more or less stayed out. There's still a little bit of a lift, but nothing to worry about. So I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and I hope you'll come back and see how we get on covering these separate components and joining them all together. And I will say that the covering process for the laminating film is going to be a little bit different to what we used in the wings. So come back and see how we get on. Thanks very much for watching.